Hey guys, welcome to Future Prospects, and we are Skype, folks. Skype. This is so interesting. I'm not only learning how to deal with different filming and stuff like that, but I'm also learning the different ways that you've got to time yourself and things like that. So it's kind of a really cool on what you're doing. With my show today, first Future Prospects Skype, we have Cara Ware. And Cara Ware is a very, very unique lady. She is Kimberlite Enterprises creative assistant. She works with all of our social media, creating things on our website. But how we met was so unique through our conversation through this COVID-19. So I invited Cara Ware to be part of our first show, Future Prospects Skype, and so I'm welcoming her and having her share her insights of what she's gone through, what she's dealing with, and she's got some really, really great insight on what we can look at. So, Cara, welcome, honey. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, honey. So, I know all about you, Pumpkin. Still learning more great things about you, but welcome to Future Prospects first, our first Skype show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And also now, I want you to introduce yourself to the viewers, hon. So, go for it.
Okay, so my name's Cara Ware, and as I'm sure you gleaned from my accent, I'm not Canadian. I wasn't born here. I moved here 5 years ago now from the UK. I moved here by myself. All of my family are back in Europe. And at the time, it was to pursue a corporate career. And it was actually, when I was in it, I was, for my age, really quite successful for the point that I got to. I worked in medical devices, and I had a team towards the end of people reporting to me. And I found that after a while, the burden of just taking on more responsibility, I could do it, but I didn't thrive on it. And I had always leaned in my personal life towards being creative. My father is a very creative person, and I'd always just done it as a hobby. And I never thought that I could pursue that as a career just because I hadn't been to university. I'd never worked as an apprentice or an assistant in any sort of creative field. But my gut feeling after feeling that pressure from the corporate world was that I was doing myself a disservice. And I felt as if I could pair the business side that I'd learnt with my creative abilities. And I quit my job quite suddenly, much to the business's dismay, back in October. And I basically went freelance, and I set myself up so that I could be without steady income at the level that I had previously. And so I could focus on just building connections, learning more, figuring out what the market base was. And I had 2 clients under my belt for marketing and social media, and generally just assisting them with things online that were a little bit out of their skill set or timeframes.
Yeah.
And that's how I met you. And I was basically copied on an email from one of my clients who had emailed 2 people, in fact, myself and somebody else, and said, can anybody help Joy with adding a PayPal button to her website? And I responded and connected with Joy and got the PayPal button up and added some extra content. And it just went from there, really. Joy and I clicked immediately on a personal and professional level. And I'm happy to say that I think, how long has it been now, Joy? About 2 months?
Yes,
it must be.
It doesn't seem that
long. I know. I've lost all sense of time. I wasn't even sure what day it was today. Right. So I've had to set alarms on my phone just to remind me what I'm meant to be doing on this day, because the weekends don't exist for me anymore.
No.
There's no such thing as not working on a Saturday or not sleeping in on a Monday. And so it's, I guess, 2 months. We were meant to meet, and we spoke about this the other day, and I'm looking up because I have a calendar up here. I actually had on March 14th, 11 a.m., meet Joy for coffee and lunch, meet her in person. Yes. And I think what had happened on the Wednesday or Thursday before that, I'd called you and I said, I have a slight stuffy nose, I'm sniffling.
And a sore throat.
and a sore throat.
Right.
And I normally I would just assume it's my allergies kicking in, because at the time it had been quite sunny and things were starting to shoot up in the ground and on the trees.
Right.
But considering that we were a couple of days away from the Canadian government closing everything down,
Right.
I just thought, in case it isn't my allergies, I can't go outside right now.
Right.
And so we've never actually met in person, which is the
Oh,
insane thing, because the timing of when we met happened to be when everything else started to fall apart and change dramatically, and attitudes and behaviors were changing just frantically around us. So it just wasn't appropriate.
right.
But eventually, when this is over, I have been invited to have dinner cooked by Joy. So we can celebrate on the patio, maybe 2 meters apart, but either way, we will meet in person at some point.
We will, hon. And the reason why, hon, that I have you on is because not only you are a creative assistant, you wear many hats, Cara. Many hats. Through the time that we were supposed to meet for our lunch to talk about what we're going to do with Kimberlite moving forward, I realized that you had a passion for people. You posted something on Facebook about when you went shopping. So at the time, everybody was hoarding toilet paper. Remember then?
Yes.
Like,
Yes,
I
I
don't
do.
know what it is with toilet paper, honey, but people are going a little bit crazy. And then you posted something on Facebook. So again, I don't want to go over the time, but we still have some time left. But in our first segment, but I want you to share your first experience when we had to lock down, when we had to all of a sudden isolate. It was like we had to go into a cave. So just share your first experience, and then I'll keep you in time there.
Yeah, so the video that I made, it was actually the first one where I recorded myself and
Right.
my voice. And it was literally just me sat in my car at 7 a.m. in the morning in a parking lot of a major grocery store here in Orangeville.
Right.
And I'm an early bird anyway, and I've always done my shopping early because I'm awake at 5 a.m. and that's what I do. But when I went round this supermarket, grocery store, I'm not sure if Canadians call it a supermarket. But
Supermarket, yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Some people kind of look at me. But basically, sorry. As I was walking around, there was just this very somber atmosphere. And I was chatting to the staff, and they were frantically trying to stock the shelves, and they were doing such a wonderful job. Right. And I was asking them how they were doing and saying, are people being polite to you? Are your managers looking after you? Do you need anything? And they were lovely, and they said for the most part people have been really good. But just as I was talking to the checkout assistant, this lady who must have been, I'm going to say early 70s, she was there with one of the smaller shopping carts, and she had bare minimum essentials in it, just bread, milk, a couple of cleaning products. But the other thing that she had was an oxygen tank with the breathing apparatus around her nose, and the one that just sits on the nasal passage there. And she had her carry bag for it, but she had it in her cart, and she was just moving so slowly, but trying to stay away from people and trying to keep to herself. And it was this really I don't know, it just hit me that she symbolized everything about this situation that other people didn't understand. And that was from the fact that people needed to be hygienic, practice social distancing or physical distancing. They shouldn't be panic buying and loading up in the supermarket to the point where people are fighting or people can't get what they need. And she had come out at that time in the morning when it was quieter, just so that she could stay away from as many people as possible whilst getting what she needed to live. And I could have cried. It was really sad. And she may even turn around and say to me, you don't need to cry about me. I'm fine. I know how to look after myself. So I don't mean it to sound patronizing. Right. But the fact of the matter is that there are millions of people like this lady who at that time in particular were struggling just to get into the supermarket and feel safe.
Right.
And that's why I made the video. It was about, I think, 4 minutes long. And just saying to people, we need to think a bit more outside of ourselves. And whilst we need to look after ourselves too, the primary focus are people who really aren't going to be okay if we don't behave.
Exactly. And that is what touched me, is when I realized there was another side, that you had a voice, but you talked so from the heart when you shared it on Facebook. Like we talked prior to that, but you shared it from the heart. And at that time, it was like the whole world just, well, I can only talk for the Western side, Canada. It's like people just kind of lost their minds for a bit. Am I wrong to say that?
I think so. And it's not representative of everybody, but it was so apparent because a lot of people were hoarding strange things,
Yes.
for one thing, like toilet paper. And on the flip side, things like milk. There was a 2-week period where I could not find milk, and my partner requires lactose-free milk for his health. It's not a choice, and I couldn't find any. And normally there's plenty, nobody wants to drink it, but people were just buying up so much of these essential goods that it meant that people who just wanted 1 carton of milk or 1 packet of toilet paper couldn't find them. And so then it's a trickle down effect where you have maybe 20% of people buying up 80% of the products.
That's right.
And then everyone else, as soon as they find it, we all turn into kind of animals, really, and we just think quick, just put it in the house and don't tell anyone. like the squirrels in my back garden. And it was insane.
Han, and I don't want to lose a minute because we have to go soon to go to our break, is that they weren't thinking, because right then it was about, what about me? What about me? It was like, what do I need to do? And that's why through the next segment, because we got 3 segments of this great interview with you, Cara, is we're going to embrace more of the pandemic and how people are going to, what you've seen, what it's done for yourself as well as myself, the self-reflection. Guys, we'll be right back. Future Prospect Skype with Cara Ware. Stay tuned. Welcome back, guys, to Future Prospects Skype. I got to put Skype in there because we're Skype with Cara Ware. Hey, Cara. That was an awesome first segment, hon. Awesome. Just phenomenal. Now, I want to recap what we were talking about with the toilet paper, but also how we kind of lost our minds a little bit. It was all about me. And how did you, moving forward now with the pandemic, with how people were dealing with it, the toilet paper, the food, you gave your insight through Facebook on your interview, your little, how would I say, filming that you shared. But can you share with the viewers from the first week, how did you deal with it, that you had to just live in your own home for a bit? You couldn't meet people, you couldn't meet your clients, you couldn't go out and be normal. So how did you deal with the unnormal? That's what I'm trying to say.
So I think I fell into a weird category of people because I'm freelance and I work for myself for the most part. Where I'm talking to you from right now is actually my office, as much as it may not look quite official officey.
It's cozy.
Yeah, exactly. It's my comfort creative space.
Right.
And it's stuffed toys aside. For me, as soon as Prime Minister Trudeau said, "Look, people need to stay home," it was just, part of it for me was being sat here, seeing that news message and going, okay. That's okay. And a lot of freelance creative people and people who work for themselves found that from that aspect, they already had established a mentality and a working routine.
That's right.
And exactly, it didn't really cause much disruption from that aspect. And for me, there were several moving parts that also made it more comfortable for me on a kind of personal and social interaction level. That my father, about 24 years ago now, he had a massive stroke when I was 7 years old, and he developed pneumonia.
Right. And right? He still lives in England.
He does.
Okay.
And England, the UK, their situation is just, it's really quite dire for various factors.
Right.
They have twice the population of Canada, and over the years, the current government has taken away bit by bit from their National Health Service, which has a similar structure to Canada, where a majority of the healthcare is free, and you top anything else up with insurance. And so his situation, my stresses and pressures actually came from not being near my family and not being able to help. And my sister and I think in February, we had a discussion, because she lives in Paris, France. So we're actually all dispersed in different countries at the moment. And I said to Kelsey, should we be thinking about going back to help my dad in case he needs it and needs our help, so we can do shopping? But we both just agreed we were far more likely to pick it up at a major airport like Toronto, Paris, or London, and then actually pass it to him, as he lives in the countryside in a very small town where there aren't really any cases. Right. So my pressure and stresses, it came from that aspect, that I felt helpless when my family would need my help the most. But again, from my dad's perspective, they expected him to die when he had his stroke, and the nurses at the time shockingly actually said, "Wow, we really didn't expect you to recover. We literally thought you were dead." And I'm not even really paraphrasing there. That's actually the way that was delivered to him. And he'd made a decision to survive. And he was alone for 22 hours a day. And so he was in his own head, unable to move, unable to speak. And so all he had was himself. Wow. And so from a very young age, he would talk to me and my sister about the power of the mind when it comes to overcoming hardships and understanding, but also protecting yourself and just making sure you have the right mental tools to cope with these stresses. And that also meant that even when I was 10 years old and it was Christmas, if I would sneeze and start to get a cold, my dad would say, "I'm really sorry, you cannot come and visit me this Christmas. We will do Christmas another time when you're healthy, but I can't risk getting sick because it will take me a month to get over it, or it will put me in the hospital." And so I've lived the last 24 years basically understanding that when somebody that I love and cannot live without is at risk if I have a normal seasonal cough. Right. And so again, when people are saying you need to protect the vulnerable, I'm like, done. That's fine. I'm good with that. And that's where that mental strength and comfort comes from me, is that I know that it's not guaranteed that if I became ill with COVID-19, there's no promise that I would be okay. However, there is a good chance that I will be. And for that reason, I couldn't live with myself for the rest of my life if I felt that I had hurt somebody or somebody's family by being reckless and kind of stretching the rules that we've been given to suit my personal needs.
Right.
And so those things were things that I knew I needed to do. And part of the thing that I'd learned was that during this time, I just expected everyone else to get it. And that was my mistake. People haven't experienced things like you and I may have. And there may be somebody over the road from me who's also experienced trauma, but may still be misinterpreting the message because they feel like it's different. Right. And so I across the pond in Europe and the UK, my stress was coming out of there, but my family assured me they're all okay mentally and they're doing what they need to do. And then from here, my stresses came from trying to navigate people that I know, whether very close to me or acquaintances, who didn't get it, who then, even if I don't know the people that they may hurt, it was stressing me out thinking, you could hurt somebody in our community and you may never know.
Right. Right. How, I want you to just recap and go back again. When you said about your father who had always had the mental strength, how is it, what kind of a mental, how would I say, thoughts or did he put into practice that you learned from this? What did he do to get through his own health that he's applied now?
It's kind of, it's really hard to say because there was no one sentence or moment that
or thoughts
he taught. Yeah, and it was almost, it changed his personality.
Right.
Not entirely. He was still my dad.
Right.
But his perspective changed, and he's a filmmaker and photographer himself, and so he would always spot things that other people wouldn't. So it would be a camera angle in a movie, or it would be outside and the trees would be lit up in a certain way during a sunset, and he would just point these things out anyway.
Right.
But then that was intensified after his stroke, because it was appreciating being in a moment and acknowledging that those moments are beautiful and we don't get many of them.
That's right. And there's also something that you and I talked about, is because your father and many people who have struggled and gone through issues, this wasn't hard to readjust their thinking.
Yeah.
It's when we now here in the Western world, honestly, we've been so spoiled that now we've had to not think about our own, but think of others around us. And how do we now visit our own inner strengths? And that's what you and I were talking about. It's like we're doing a self-reflection.
Yeah. Yeah. And the challenge with humans, and I'm not a psychologist in any way, but it's the challenge that I see is that we all have our own opinions on who we are ourselves. And some of us really beat ourselves up about everything that's negative and we amplify it. And then other people may acknowledge their weaknesses or the negative things that they tend to gravitate towards too, but they amplify the fact that their opinion is the gospel. And it makes it very difficult when you have, everybody has the right to an opinion. We're all individuals and we all think differently, which is fantastic, but it's really hard to educate people and change the path that
they've always been on. You there?
Did it freeze? Yep, I'm here. I don't know if that was me or I could still hear you.
No, that's okay. I just went, okay, back live.
I know. It's like when you pause a movie and you've got some just a perfect Hollywood actor just on screen and they're just pulling this like...
You know what I love about this, if anything, Cara, is that I've always been myself. But this allows you even to be more because you're out of your comfort zone. You're in your own home talking about something that is very, very dear to your heart. So what you were saying, do you remember what you were saying before we froze?
Well, actually, I feel like that symbolizes this entire situation. We were all doing our thing and then everything froze. And Skype is telling us.
Exactly. Self-reflection. We've got 2 more episodes and we've only got maybe 2 minutes and half a second, watching my clock here. What have you seen? What kind of stuff that you've learned when you've self-reflection? What has this helped you? What have you seen about yourself that you've had to use?
So I definitely acknowledge that I was one of the first people to see just the gravity of the situation and what it was that I needed to do for the benefit of human life.
Right.
And I know that I'm not saying I'm saving everyone, but saving one person to me it's amazing, and it's important, and it protects people from pain. But at the same time, that was my strength, and I found I couldn't use it to help other people. I was trying to help, but it was only benefiting me and my comfort. And so another strength that I found I needed to pull on was patience to a degree, and then figuring out ways in adapting my communication. So maybe people who are not paying attention fully, or not fully understanding, or deliberately hiding from it so they remain ignorant, I'd need to find a different way to get it to sink in. And it's changing how I speak, changing the information that I'm showing them, or trying to make it more relevant to them, or trying to figure out the things that mean the most to them, because nobody in their right mind is going to say, I'm going to go out and just buy a pizza today because I want one, nothing else. And then I'm going to go see my grandmother and hug her because I don't really care if my grandma gets sick. Nobody says that.
Right.
And people struggle when they can't see something, it's not tangible. And at the moment, in the more rural areas of Ontario, we're not seeing it. And so it's trying to get people to place themselves in a situation where it has come into their home, or it's affected their friends.
On that note, we got to go to break. You're amazing. I love you lots. We'll be right back, guys. This is awesome. With Cara Ware. Cara, that was phenomenal. I love the freeze moment there for a minute. That was pretty cool. And kind of gets you a little bit of a laughter a little bit through all of this. But anyway, hon, that was amazing. We covered on who you are. We covered on self-reflection. We covered on your dad and your family, and how you had to respect in not just jumping on a plane and going over for them, but respecting their health and their well-being. But now in this, you and I had talked about the political view. We've got our prime minister, who, to me, who's doing an amazing job, phenomenal job. But how we now in the Western world, and then several people I've talked about, is not only with our son, Michael, who's attending McMaster, Sean, my husband, and even other people, even Ron, I've talked about this with, how we in the Western world, Ron, who's our producer here at Rogers, is how the Western world is literally, we're spoiled. We really are. And this is the unknown for us. So what's your views on it? I'm going to give you my point of views and take it from there, hon, because you shared some really, really good pointers in our conversation. Go for it, girl.
Yeah, so it's in a standard world. So say this time last year, no one would have predicted this.
No.
And it was business as usual, and people were focusing on just living for fun, living for their job. And we have a beautiful thing in the Western world where we have a lot of freedoms.
Yeah.
There is room for improvement without focusing too heavily on that, but we have a lot of freedoms. And I feel that we got confused here, where we're doing something for a higher purpose,
right,
which won't last forever.
Right.
And ordinarily, our governments and the powers that be, they're not really these authoritarian governments that are trying to snoop in on our lives and try and take over everything and tell us exactly what we have to do. We are free to go hiking in beautiful parks in Ontario, or we're free to go and get a haircut. We're free to go shopping in large malls and just play with our children outside. Right. And it's suddenly these things that we say are civil rights, and that's civil rights is actually something that I've heard people use a lot during this pandemic, that being told to stay indoors, and you can still go out to exercise, walk your dog, sit in your back garden, as a temporary measure, people do believe it's an infringement on their civil rights, and it's an infringement on their freedom. And say, for example, in the US, people feel like it's going against what America represents, being told to stay indoors.
Right.
And you can play in this world of freedom and liberties and freedom of expression, but it's kind of separating that in a time of crisis where those things actually transfer into a luxury and a blessing and something to be grateful for the future when we are allowed to do these things again. And then it comes down to actual human rights and being able to keep people safe. And again, I think a lot of people in the Western world would argue that a human right is to feel safe and protected from danger, and especially from death. And that is actually something that's taking precedent at the moment, which is protecting humans. And maybe people want to argue that it's only affecting a small percentage of people, but there are ripple out effects that people also forget. And for Ontario and Quebec, for example, where the care homes are just, it's traumatic. It's traumatic to even just see it on the news as people are talking about it. It breaks my heart, let alone the poor people that are residents there and the poor staff members that are having to contend with this and still have to go to work to do it.
And can I interject for a second?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Also about, now this is something that came on Facebook that I had noticed from a prior guest, Leah Denbach. She was posting, she's a photographer that takes photography, capturing pictures with homeless people. So that is what she's actually dealing with. And excuse that phone right now, it's ringing on my husband's cell phone while I'm using it as my stopwatch. So folks, just ignore that. But homeless people out there, they can't go anywhere, Cara, right? They can't go anywhere. They can't talk to anybody. And what the sad thing is that how are they dealing with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And actually, I'd had a discussion, I think, with my dad a couple of weeks ago, because I had been part of a conversation, and I can't really remember the context, but basically a town somewhere else in Ontario was, they're trying to support local businesses, and they were trying to do either curbside pickup or just sanitary, safe ways of customers still being able to buy things and collect it without coming into contact with the owners. Yeah. And what they've been doing was leaving the bags that people had purchased outside with their names on and as far apart from each other as they could. But they were finding that homeless people within this town would come and take the bags. And they were complaining that basically the business owners are stressed by this because they're losing inventory, and they've been shouting at them through the window and threatening them, and they were demanding that they get extra security and police presence for this town. And I was aghast just listening to this conversation, and I just thought, you are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people who deal with horror and tragedy and threats to them every single day anyway.
That's right.
And now you're saying when a desperate person who has no other option is trying to take something that might make them a bit of money, or it may be food or hand sanitizer within these bags that they are trying to take to keep themselves alive, quite literally prevent themselves from succumbing to this situation. Mm-hmm. And I was just surprised that people were responding with such anger at somebody who literally has nothing. They don't have anything.
That's right.
And yes, small businesses are suffering, and that in itself is a concern for people when that's their entire family's income and that's their livelihood. But there has to be a balance there, and figure out a different way to have your customers come and collect, but don't use brute force against somebody who has no means to fight anything. It just seemed really tragic.
But isn't that also now, if you don't mind me interjecting, that because we've never had to struggle over here, we've struggled, we've gone through SARS, we've gone through stuff, but this is worldwide. This is the whole world.
Yeah.
Now, the Western world has always heard stories of that, but never had to actually deal with it. Can you still hear me?
Yep, I've still got you.
All right.
I'm nodding. I don't know if you can see. I'm trying to.
No, I can, but I just had to make sure my little red thing came up there on the Skype thing, so I had to go over and reach for it. But we've always had things on the norm. Now we're on the unnormal side. So now we have to deal with share, and we have to deal with empathy. We can talk about it at our coffee tables in Starbucks, but now we have to put it into action. So that is unnormal for the Western world to do. Not all of us, but the majority of us. So putting it on a personal side, how is it that you have done your own self-look, like what you've had done? What have you learned from this that you've put in place?
It's part of it is just I had a value anyway that I just didn't want to be supporting businesses that didn't align with my personal values.
Right.
And that is quite a millennial thing to say, and I'm aware of that, and I'm a millennial, so I guess I fit that stereotype. But it was just, I just see it as there's so much more to life than just money grabbing.
Yes.
Or taking things away from people because you perceive them as lesser. Right. And one thing that I need to figure out how to do this, would be to help support what I'm going to refer to as the forgotten demographics. And these people have been put at the forefront during this pandemic because we spent a very long time ignoring care homes because we didn't want to put money into them, and we didn't want to pay the healthcare workers, and we spent a very long time ignoring frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, the paramedics, disabled people, such as my father. He claims disability benefits, and those disability benefits are nothing. You can't live on that. But they're also the vulnerable. So all of those people, and the homeless too, that we've just been quietly sailing by because the government's just decided that they're not worth paying attention to. All of a sudden, it's like, we need to protect all of these people. And we think if you had to begin with, we probably wouldn't have this problem. And it's more so in the UK, for example, that is being amplified at the moment, because tragically, so many NHS workers in the hospitals have actually lost their lives.
NHS workers?
Oh, a national healthcare system.
Okay.
So it's basically the healthcare system that's free to the public. You can go private if you wish. But all of those ER nurses and quarantine room nurses, we've lost thousands. It's awful, but they don't have PPE, they don't have the space, they don't have the funds.
Wow.
And when you start moving into a system where you're trying to privatize everything, and say in the US, where people can't afford healthcare because they have a very libertarian society where they feel like you are entitled to anything providing you earn it, and that includes your health.
Right.
So you need to earn money in order to be able to pay for critical healthcare. Or you can go to this lovely public one, which is just disgusting and full of disease in itself because they can't afford to clean it and maintain it. And those are the things that are it's just pouring out of the woodwork at the moment. And people they're either stepping up and saying, we are so sorry that we thought what we were doing was right. It's clear that we've made a mistake and we're going to try and fix it right now. Or you have other people who just they're kind of looking at it and going, it's not that bad.
That's right.
We don't know what you're talking about. But I think it
drives me insane.
Need to have.
Yes, I know through what we're dealing with now, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We're going to have to live in a whole different world, which I want to actually showcase and share with our viewers. You're doing a great job, hon. I really, really wish this was a longer show, but we are doing a great job. Guys, we'll be right back with Cara Ware. Phenomenal. Stay tuned, guys. Right back. Welcome back to Future Prospects, guys. Cara Ware, creative assistant, oh my God, speaker, author. She is going to be doing great stuff with her lives. But on a, how would I say this? I'm just trying to find the words because we've covered so much. Like through this pandemic, COVID-19, it's literally, there's so many conversations you can have with it. You know what I'm saying, Cara? There's so many different areas you can go. So I don't want to take away from this last segment. I want you to talk about and share with the viewers, what is it that you feel that we could learn from this? What is it that we are learning? What is it that you have learned, which, you know, that's made you even a stronger person in life? Because this is challenging a lot of different areas for us, as well as myself. You know, we're alone in our home. We can't go anywhere. We've got to develop new strengths. Go for it, my love. And then I can interject anytime.
Okay, so I'll start from what I feel I've learned. And yes. I actually, during this time, we're still under a state of emergency in Ontario, and the cases are still going up. So how I feel right now, I may have built on that or completely changed my mind in a month. So please check back with me on what I've learned. But as of today, it's clarity in the way that my perception of relationships and just how I can't control what other people do. And I feel as though that we all literally have the freedom to do exactly what we want. Legal, right. Illegal, offensive, not offensive. We have the freedom because I can physically do anything that I want. But what we can't control is what people then react to us with.
Right.
And that applies to myself. So yeah. I can feel like I'm saying the correct thing. I can feel like I'm doing it from a place of love. But I cannot control the response that I get, which is why, and referring back to what I was saying previously, just about trying to readjust how I'm communicating and talking to people if the situation requires it. But at the same time, for the people who are doing things that they shouldn't be right now, whether it's questionable or in a grey area as to whether or not it's allowed, or if it's just downright irresponsible and breaking every regulation that we have, they physically can do that, but they can't control people's responses and reactions and opinions, and they can't have a say over whether or not that law enforcement will come in and
right.
stop them from doing it. And
right.
that's one of the key things that I just need to carry with me and remember, is that everybody has autonomy, and I will always do my best to educate and speak up, especially when I feel so strongly about it. And that's a major thing that I've experienced firsthand over the last 5 weeks. I feel like I'm going to learn more because everybody's behaviour seems to be changing every week. We went from this stage of frantic panic,
hoarding
toilet paper, just squirreling it away and not using it, and they will never have to buy it again, and right. They're going to be selling that on eBay. But that being said, either that or Halloween costume, maybe just as a mummy, like in October. Yeah. That's just some creative ideas there for the people who have a lot of paper. But that seems to have subsided quite, that sense of panic, because people just, it's like the fight or flight. You can't stay in that high adrenaline stage forever because your body isn't designed to do that. And so now we went, okay, so what else can we do? Let's go over here and watch a lot of Netflix, and then that gets boring, so let's go over here and maybe we'll decide to go to the park because everything seems kind of quiet and I think I can get away with it. And so people just, we push boundaries. That's what we do. We dip a toe in, test the water and come back. So I think what we're going to learn over the next few weeks is how far can we take that sense of needing to do things that we normally do and reverting back to old habits, and how much is that going to damage us? Or is it going to turn into a situation where people are going to turn to people like me and say, you overreacted, you were too preachy, and look at it, nothing happened. Do you know anybody who was hurt? No, you don't. And but I can live with that. And that's something else that I learned. I can live with it comfortably because
Good.
I feel no shame
Good.
in the intensity to which people felt I took to this.
Right.
And then as a whole, just as human beings, I think when we look at ourselves in the West, businesses that we perceived as a necessity to our lives and things that we like doing, so clothes shopping is a first example, these things are definitely a luxury. And in a society, we run in a capitalist society, and so buying things and consuming is often associated with status and
gratification.
Yeah, exactly. We think it makes us feel good, and yes, a new outfit may make you feel good and more confident, but it's the abundance. And all of a sudden these stores were labeled as non-essential, and it was very symbolic as to what is required for us to function safely.
That's right.
And what isn't. And I don't know that we will fully move away from that, but I know just from a marketing perspective right now, there is a very fine line that businesses need to understand with it. Yes, of course, you still need to advertise if you're trying to save your business, but you need to change your message. You can't just shove a pair of shoes in people's faces and say you need to buy these shoes because it's the only pair of shoes you'll ever need, because people lost their jobs. And people don't care about having a 20th pair of shoes at the moment because it doesn't matter.
That's
and
right.
So we are walking a very fine line with everything. And if it does revert back, I think it will take time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because most people are actually doing the right thing, which is wonderful.
Yes.
And these people will be the ones who are scared.
What are they doing?
Just staying inside and being afraid to go near people, and they're the ones who are wearing gloves and masks in the supermarkets and just being hyper vigilant. And that's because it is scary. And the reality is we don't really know very much about this virus and this pandemic. We don't know how long it lasts on surfaces. We don't know who's vulnerable and who isn't in the scheme of things when you look at people who are healthy and fit and have no underlying health conditions. So people are being extra cautious because they don't understand what it means for them personally. And say in the US, certain states are reopening their economy to protect the small businesses. Yeah, exactly. And so that's this Friday, I believe, and we'll see how that goes. But I think it's it might be one of the more southern states. I can't remember which one. They were saying like places like bowling alleys can open.
That's right.
Which really, like, I don't. But nobody's going to go.
No.
And so the businesses can open and say, I need to be open for it to save my livelihood. But the reality is that most people in America are scared to go out and start socializing, and especially touching things that other people have touched without it being clean.
Right.
And it will be the same here, that people are just scared, and the same in Europe, that people are scared. People want more freedom, but maybe they look more towards just feeling like, I want to go out in my boat and just sit on a lake and fish and not talk to anybody, because that's what I normally do.
Isn't it like changing your mind, changing your mindset? That's the hardest, because you've always thought one way. And it's changing the way we have to live until we find the vaccine. And it's not looking at me, it's looking at we. Like I've always said, we live in a community, but we live in a world, Cara. Because if we don't work together on this can go longer. There's even conversation of it coming back in the fall. So it's being unselfish, and being working together. It's teaching us that we have to listen, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And that goes for, like you said, it's literally we. And by we, it's our leaders in our
Right.
countries acknowledging that it doesn't work if another country that we heavily rely on isn't on the same page.
Our allies.
Exactly. And even people who aren't our allies, most of the time is it just a case of saying, okay, so I disagree with everything else that you do, but
Right.
please can we just work together on this because you also don't want this for your citizens.
Exactly.
And we're a lot of countries seem to kind of be getting there. So there was kind of a peace agreement across, I think, maybe 8 countries. I think the UK was one of them. I think Canada may have been one of them. Canada are quite, they've stepped back a bit anyway with wars, which
Yes.
is wonderful, and why Canadians have this beautiful reputation for being kind.
Yes.
And it's, but then you have people who really push back, who just want to almost dictate the entire planet. And
Let's not go there.
no. If you want me to talk for an hour, then we can talk about that.
That's right.
And I might need wine to do that too, because it's really quite stressful. Exactly. It would be a different show then, but
Yeah.
maybe another time. But you are 100% correct that it is a united front when it comes to tackling a crisis that threatens so many people, and not either directly or indirectly, because for every one person who passes away, sadly, they have an entire circle of people that are now feeling that.
That's
And that comes with its own issues, such as mental health, it's grief. It can tear apart families and relationships. And I think the other thing that people are going to learn is that whilst we all need to be on the same page, is that it's also shown a lot of people what kind of relationships they have existing in their circles.
That's right. You know something? I'm going to get you back. You're going to come back on Future Prospects Skype because you've got a lot more. But I don't want to lose this question that we're coming up, wrapping up at the show. So I'm looking at my minutes here now. So what words of wisdom do you have to give to youth who are a strong voice right now and to people? And then I'll have to close you out and we'll come back again. Go for it, real fast.
So people in general, it's just acknowledging that this is not forever. And at some point, this will be in a history book or online, depending how people are learning. And we will be called in to schools, much like war veterans are, to talk about the most well-known wars throughout history and recount their story. And these children aren't going to know anything about it. It's going to be almost just a movie to them. And they're going to ask you questions. They're going to ask us all questions.
That's right.
Think about how you're going to answer them. And then for the youth, you do have opportunity and you can do great things during this time to show how beautiful you are.
On that note, you're coming back. I love you, hon. Thank you, Cara Ware. Guys, watch
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Love you. Bye.